Good evening and welcome, everyone. First meeting of September and back to normal with kids going back to school, us back to our full schedule for council. And welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here with us. And for those that are online, thank you. I'll be advising you that this meeting is being audio, video recorded and live streamed on the Town of Innisfil's YouTube channel and shall form part of the public record, which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about that bylaw, you can check with the clerk's office. I'd also like to ask those, it's great to see more people showing up for council meetings. It's been since pre-COVID, we had this many people in the room, so it's really nice, and those joining online as well. But if you are here and you have a cell phone with you, if I could please ask you to make sure it's on either mute or silent. I'm going to make sure mine is, so I do the same thing, and just so it doesn't interrupt any of our presentations. Thank you for that. We're going to ask, I'm going to ask the clerk if there's any open forum presentations for this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are two. There is Megan Varga and Michael Hayes.
Thank you. And before we get to those, I would ask Councillor Ices, please, to deliver the land acknowledgement.
The town of Innisfil acknowledges that Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewa of Rama First Nation, and Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation. And we thank them for generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. We're on item 2, which is the open forum. The open forum is an opportunity for people to speak for 2 minutes on items that are pertinent to tonight's agenda. So the first person to sign up for open forum was Michael Hayes, and he's speaking to the item regarding streetlights on Limerick Street. Welcome, Mr. Hayes. Whenever you're ready, sir.
Good evening. It's nice to be back. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Members of council have a survey that we privately put together, myself, Archie Gardner, and Chuck Willoughby, and then we canvassed the residents of our street. And you have before you the results of that survey. And I have to say at the onset that it sort of hit bounce back, people thinking, how could you get 95%? But we did. That was the number of people who were at their residences that day. We canvassed. Archie went back to catch those that we didn't catch the first day, and they were most appreciative. Nobody knew this was about to happen or could possibly happen. So they were very pleased that we were taking the initiative to come to you to ask that this process not go through. And we hope that the voting that the people gave us and the support will strongly say to you that Limerick Street would like to remain the way it is at the present. And I think it's important that what the people want should be addressed, and I know you have your rules and regulations you abide by, but these would be, everybody was openly told what it was the options were, and they could vote yes or no. There were some who did say no. It was very peaceful. There was no animosity anywhere around. But the numbers that were calculated are the numbers you see before you. And I guess when I read what's on this page here with regards to a poll, I have to ask the question to council of our poll, and if you do a poll, which poll will you respect? And I would like to think that, I guess personally for the three of us, that it would be our poll, that this is the one that we went out face to face, got the answers from the people, got their comments, and that this is what they would like to see happen. So I guess really, as they say, the ball is in your court now as to how you're going to handle this and what you have to do and what you do not have to do. But the people of our street, our community, who answered our questions and gave us their signatures, very much want to see it remain the way it is right now at present. There are other issues that they brought up while we were there, but you're not here for that tonight. But they certainly had a list, and I have never done this before. But I thought I was on council, getting all these do this. But they at least said, "Look, thank you for doing this." So that's what they wanted. And one resident I spoke to today, she said, "Go get them." And so I'm here to get you. And I don't know. I don't know how to, if I can ask where we go from here, or what would be the plan?
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. First of all, welcome to our world. Knocking on doors and getting your to-do lists. So during open forum, we're just here to listen to you, and there's no opportunity to ask questions or comment now. But when we get to item 10.3 on the agenda, which is Councillor Drodge's notice of motion, or motion which notice has been given, there'll be ample opportunity for us to debate, ask questions, and if you'll be so kind as to stick around, I think there is an option. Mr. Drodge is hoping we can move this up a little in the agenda and deal with it sooner rather than later, so you don't have to wait till the very end of the meeting. But there'll be
ample opportunity.
Okay, I'm off to a good start. Ample opportunity for lots of debate and questions at that time.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Well, again, you have the numbers there, and as I say, the people just want Limerick to be Limerick the way it is. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next item on open forum, number 2, is Megan Varga, and Megan is here to speak about item C1, which is the roundabout. Welcome, Ms. Varga.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and staff. It's nice to see you all again. I cannot stay for the debate, but I would like to highlight a few points, and I did miss the deadline to delegate, and 2 minutes isn't very long, so my notes are in point form and not meant to sound harsh. I officially feel like I'm on the Beat the Mayor's Buzzer show. But my points are a bit of history about the roundabout on Big Bay Point Road, the 13th and the 25th, where Fire Station 5 is located. In 2018, Council voted to build a roundabout as fire needed assurance that traffic would keep moving so emergency vehicles could exit the fire hall. Traffic signals would not accommodate this. After 2018, InPower upgraded the utilities in the intersection and did not take into account that a roundabout was approved to be built and was in the design stage, which does include requesting comments from local utilities. So they would have known about the project. At the January 11th meeting of this year, staff asked Council to increase the budget for the roundabout by almost $600,000 to move newly installed utilities as they are in the way, and InPower insists the town covers the cost since they were just installed. A 40-minute debate on the matter took place and is available to review on YouTube beginning at the 25-minute 31-second mark. Staff informed Council that there is an increase in traffic in the area and improvements must happen with that intersection prior to the 2031 timeline from the town's approved transportation master plan. Staff informed Council that delaying this project would delay all further projects on the town's traffic master plan because the planned work on the 25th, Big Bay Point Road, and the 13th all branch off of this intersection. Staff informed council that any delay, even deferring the matter to the next meeting to provide more information as requested, would have monumental repercussions. Councillor Drudge did request a motion to defer, and it was defeated, and the motion passed to increase the cost of the roundabout. Now today, keeping in mind that the fire hall was designed with a roundabout in mind to ensure access, to be built way before the Transportation Master Plan recommended timelines of 2031, staff is asking council to either change the plan to signals or terminate the project until 2031. And I do look forward to reviewing the debate on YouTube and to hearing this precedent-setting decision, and I do thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Varga. Much appreciated. That is it for open forum, which takes us to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. And there is an amended recommendation on the screen accommodating Councillor Drudge's request. A mover and a seconder for this, Deputy Mayor Fowler, Councillor Zanella. All in favor of the amended recommendation? That is carried. Next is item 4, which is disclosure of interest. Is there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, conflict of interest? I'm seeing no hands, but if one becomes apparent at any given time, please let us know, and the clerks will make the necessary arrangements for you to fill in the forms. Next is item number 5, which is presentations and petitions, and we're pleased to have with us tonight Emily McIntosh, the Executive Director of Contact Community Service, who's here to give us an update on their work. Welcome, Ms. McIntosh.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to be here. My name is Emily. I'm the Executive Director of Contact Community Services. This feels like it's been a long time coming. I was planning to do this a couple of years ago, and then COVID hit, and I had my second baby, but here we are. So just wanting to provide an update of who Contact Community Services is and what we do, especially because we don't have a physical location here in Innisfil, but we do service the residents of Innisfil, specifically in our housing department. I'm pressing the clicker. Oh, great. Next slide, please. So our mission is to be a proactive leader in South Simcoe, providing responsive services in housing, employment, and community support. We envision healthy communities where everyone has access to supports and the opportunity to thrive. This is just an overview of our values, and we believe that these are what differentiate us from other providers. We really are focused on being inclusive and person-centered. So we recognize that no two people are alike in their journey or their needs. We are driven by compassion. We recognize that problems don't come one at a time, and that's why we're there for residents. Advocacy became a core value because we recognize that in order to address poverty and the struggles that residents are facing, we have to be able to address systemic barriers, and we can only engage in that if we incorporate advocacy as a core value. We also are extremely collaborative, and this is a core foundation of who we are. So we work cohesively with both our team, other agencies, community groups, and also closely with municipalities, and excited to really foster that relationship here to ensure that resident needs can be met. So this is just a bit of a snapshot. I'm not going to go through all of it because it will be public, but you can see there that it's a pretty powerful statement. We actually assist over 3,500 residents in South Simcoe annually. So we offer employment services. So this would be similar to Agilic here in Innisfil, and we do partner with them. So we provide job search and workshops. We do employer services, and in fact, one of our employers that we're working with is right here in Innisfil. And we also hosted the first newcomer event in Bradford, and we're very open to doing any of these types of events in Innisfil as well, should you see a need. Our employment office out of Bradford speaks 6 different languages, so it's something that we're very well versed in. I wanted to speak to our housing services. Obviously, we know how important this is for pretty much probably every single Canadian. We are the housing resource center for South Simcoe. So we have both preventative housing services as well as housing first case management. So the focus on prevention has only increased because what we're seeing now is if somebody is being evicted because a landlord says that they're moving in a family member, now you often have a senior citizen who has worked their whole life who can no longer afford another place to live in the community that they've lived and worked in for years. So we work with people before they are experiencing homelessness to access financial supports through the County of Simcoe and otherwise to be able to retain their housing. We also work with those individuals experiencing homelessness through Housing First Case Management. So that is everything from meeting a landlord, going over agreements, move-in costs, etc. We can assist with all of that. We also do offer community programs for seniors, and we know that this is also a program that is offered through the Innisfil Library. We have a focus on County of Simcoe subsidized housing, so we do provide that support here in Innisfil. So the last year alone, we have had over 280 registrations, and programming ranged from ukulele lessons to gnome painting. I wanted to highlight our volunteer services because this is something that we are doing here in Innisfil. So I wanted to introduce Arlette Fonseca. She is our manager of volunteer resources. So one of the things that came out of your community consultations is that residents want to know how they can engage in volunteer opportunities, and a lot of community groups and organizations need volunteers to sustain their operations. So you'll see that we do have a portal. It is available on our website. This is actually linked to the larger 211 portal, but it is specific to South Simcoe. So if you know of organizations that are looking for volunteers, we would encourage them to reach out to Arlette, or they can go on the website and post. And similarly, anybody who is searching to connect to an agency looking for volunteers can set up a profile as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to mention the clothesline. We have 2 locations, one in Bradford, one in Alliston, and this is something that we are exploring here in Innisfil. So the clothesline store, the beautiful thing about it is it's a dignity-driven model. Everybody shops, you just don't know who's paying and who's not. 100% of the proceeds are reinvested back into the charity. So certainly, I know that there are resources here in Innisfil, but if there was anything beyond what was available here, you can refer them to one of our other locations. And we provide volunteer opportunities for people from all walks of life. So our motto is everyone deserves a home, employment, and a future. And I wanted to share that through the generous support of the Innisfil Community Foundation, we have specific funds earmarked for Innisfil residents to be able to assist them with financial strain. Okay, so there is no set criteria. It goes through our housing department, and we work with that person, we learn to understand their situation, and then we provide support accordingly. So I did want to flag that for all the counselors here, because I know you're maybe receiving calls, you know, I'm behind on my rent, or I can't address this utility bill, I can't afford back to school supplies for my children, I can't pay for this identification, whatever it is, please do direct them to us. And as riveting as this presentation was, I would like to share with you our video annual report.
When people are at their lowest, they need not just to be told that somebody understands or cares, but shown that in a nuanced human way that you can't write in a policy book. And Contact is really, really good at being human and coming in at the ground floor where we need them to be.
Poverty in our communities is often invisible.
We meet people from all walks of life.
We often don't know if somebody is couch surfing and is living precariously.
From having full-time jobs, families, to individuals that are just trying to get by. We're all just one bad day away from needing these supports.
I went from having everything to having nothing.
Something that Contact Community Services does differently is offer flexibility. We have the opportunity to pivot quickly and respond to the unique needs of each individual, and we work very hard to do so. We are just really focused on putting the social back in social services.
We are here because we genuinely want to help. and we want them to feel heard and we want them to feel seen. And I think that's the beauty of Contact.
I'm 3 weeks into having a place now, and I'm really thankful. The amount of dignity that provides alone is worth everything, and it does give you hope for the future.
This year marked a significant milestone for us as we celebrated 46 years in the community. This is such a testament to the resilience and determination of our organization and our unwavering commitment to serve families and individuals in need.
People here, they've opened doors for me to get myself off the street, look at schooling, put my life in the better position and moved it forward.
There are so many things that we require in life to feel valued and have the stability to thrive. This year, we were so excited to be able to re-engage our seniors in person to ensure that some of our most isolated residents have access to programming and also an opportunity to have a conversation and really strengthen those relationships that are going to be critical for their health.
When you get to be old like me, it's really great to have connections.
They held ukulele classes for seniors. Imagine all these seniors playing little ukuleles. You know, it's Contact, and that's what they do for the community. They do everything for this community.
Something that I think is so unique about Contact is the clothesline. It provides volunteer opportunities for people from all walks of life.
The community that you're volunteering with is very welcoming, very warm. It's the top of the bucket list for me to actually volunteer. You get to interact with people of all different age groups, ethnicity, race, and you're working together as one. That's what you're working as a community, and you're giving back to the community.
It's just helping people out. I like to help people, and I like to chat to them too.
We also give away to anybody in need. The system is you come in with a form, or we'll fill out a form, and then you shop just like every other customer.
There are very few spaces in our communities today that are actually truly inclusive, and the clothesline is one of them. So if you're looking to volunteer or make a donation, please do stop by the clothesline. They have the best finds and you'll meet the best people.
The money made here at the clothesline is 100% put back into the services to cover Contact's non-government programs.
And that is so incredibly important because 25% of our program costs are unfunded. So we rely on our community members, our volunteers, and our community donors to make that possible.
This year, we initiated a new fundraising campaign called the Community Hope Chest. We realized that there were so many people in the community that just need urgent support to get them through some tough times. And quite often that support just doesn't fit nicely into a funding model. We reached out to our community businesses and individuals, and boy, did they ever come back helpful.
I donate to Contact because I just feel what they're doing for the community, helping people in need, is a great thing, and I'm just so happy to be a part of that.
I love coming here. I love giving back to the community.
It's about giving. It's about community.
Thank you so much to our community members through volunteers, donors, businesses, elected representatives. It takes every one of us, and we are so grateful to each of you for helping us make Contact Community Services a success and ensuring that everyone has access to a home, employment, and a future.
I owe them a safe place for me and my son. I mean, that's bigger than probably anything else you could ever be thankful for, really.
Don't cry. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation, Emily, and for the fine work you and your staff and your volunteers do, particularly in this day and age. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I just had a quick question. I know that before, I know you said you don't have an office here in Innisfil, but I was curious if you were part of there used to be a program at Lakeshore Library on Thursdays where they had a whole bunch of different services. They all came in and kind of met together, and it was kind of the hub on Thursday, so to speak, at the library. Have you ever been a part of that, or?
I believe that we were. I believe our housing service manager was attending those. So we've actually just had a switch. So I will flag that to make sure that we are there, because we are definitely looking to integrate here in Innisfil, because we service Innisfil.
Yeah.
And so that is a fantastic idea. I'll flag that for our new manager. And the other thing I wanted to reiterate is, if there is somebody in Innisfil, we will travel to them. They do not have to come to an office in Bradford or an office in Alliston. We will actually send a staff to go and meet with them, because sometimes that's just the best way to do things.
Anyone else? Questions or comments? Councillor Drodge.
Through you, Your Worship, I've actually had the opportunity to have a presentation from you guys from 100 Men That Give a Damn, and it was fantastic.
Thank you.
I think you guys might have won that night, but anyway, I implore everything you guys are doing, and I strongly suggest you reaching out to 100 Men again and have another meeting so we get to see you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments? I was glad to hear you mention 211. I think it's a really underutilized service in our community. And for those members who might not know, it's a service of information where you can phone up. It's paid for. It's a subscription that the County of Simcoe pays for all residents in all over Simcoe County. And you can dial 211 and ask for any type of service, be it services that Contact offers, if you're struggling with daycare, struggling with language classes, struggling with any kind of illness or travel to a hospital or mental health and addiction issues, anything. If you call 211, they have a directory of all of the services that are provided across the county. So it's, I always say it's our best kept secret. So I get it, every time I get a chance, I talk about it. Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you again for your presentation. And I'd ask for a mover and a seconder, please, that the update from Contact Community Services be received. Councillor Richardson and Councillor Drodge, all those in favour, and that is carried. Next is item 6.1, which is Mr. Regis, Tim Regis, regarding development charges DC agreement. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Regis.
Thank you. In 2018, we bought a property that had a dwelling on it currently. It was deemed uninhabitable by the town. We tore that down. As part of the sales agreement, there was a 5-year waiver of development charges. We got as far as we could in the process when the pandemic occurred, which made it virtually impossible to carry on the process. We have employed an architect, we have drawings, we have architecturally stamped drawings. To get someone to do anything was impossible, first of all. Secondly, to get someone to quote anything was almost impossible. So obviously the timeline has gone by. It has now expired, and we're asking for an extension to 2025 of those development charges.
Thank you, Mr. Regis. Anyone have any questions, comments for Mr. Regis? Councillor Constantine?
I would like to ask the staff, what would be the implication if we extend it for another 2 years?
Director Lee? Or perhaps Mr. Melanishan. I might have called on the wrong person.
Thanks, Mayor Dolan. So this is under the legislation, the Development Charges Act, and there are specific provisions within the Act that allow, from the time of a demolition permit being issued, an exemption to the development charges for a period of 5 years. But the legislation is very clear on that 5-year requirement. So we would have to look at other components of the legislation to see if there's any flexibility, but that is actually not a town requirement, that's in the provincial legislation.
So do we even have the ability to extend it, or is that beyond our capabilities?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Waters. The legislation is clear about the 5-year requirement, but staff could certainly look at the bylaw and other components of the legislation to see if there are other ways. It may not be an extension, understanding the request from Mr. Regis, but that specific rule within the legislation is very clear.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Waters.
I can sympathize with Mr. Regis on this because I'm currently building a cottage, and over the pandemic, several contractors backed out, and I can certainly see how during a pandemic, which is once in our lifetime situation, that this can happen. So I empathize with him and I sympathize with his situation. So it's certainly, he's not the only one. I'm sure I even had to go to my building department and ask them, because I was overdue on our building because the contractors couldn't commit. So I certainly sympathize with your situation.
Thank you.
Hopefully only once in our lifetime, Councillor. And just to clarify,
Amen.
That wasn't in this municipality, it was in a different municipality. I just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Constantine.
Through you, Worship, so I would request to see if staff could look in through it and see if we could extend it for him.
So Councillor Constantine is asking for staff to investigate if there's any opportunities for an extension. Does that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Councillor. Is that what you want to say? So do you have a seconder?
Yes.
Your council, who's your seconder?
Councillor Richardson.
So now let's see if the wording on this slide is what you're looking for. Does that work for you, Councillor? Yes. Okay, so we have a revised recommendation that's been duly moved and seconded. Any comments or questions on the revision? Councillor Ices.
I thank you, through your worship. I do sympathize with Mr. Regis as well, but I'm just wondering, is there any concern about this being others that would come forward to ask for the same thing?
I'm looking to Director Lee or Director Melanishan.
Through your worship to Councillor Ices, yes, I think this would be a bit of a precedent. So that will be part of the staff investigation, and we'll come back to council advising either way, but we will do our investigation.
Other questions or comments? So we will vote on the recommendation that's on the screen, which is the revised recommendation. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Regis. Next is item, I believe now we're going to item 10.2, which was Councillor Drodge's motion for which notice has been given. Councillor Drodge. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor?
Thanks, through your worship. So I don't know if I can do any better than Mr. Hayes. He was pretty clear on Limerick Street's stance, but I was on that road and I had many conversations with the gentleman in front of us this evening. And if you've never been on Limerick Street, you need to have a walk down Limerick Street. It's its own community. They thrive on their own. It's a dead-end road. And when they say they want to remain a dark community, that's because that's the way it's been for many, many, many years. So the individuals there are the type of people that want to live the way that they are living, which is in complete darkness. but they all love it. So I support it 100%, and hopefully we can get this passed. Thanks.
Other questions or comments regarding this motion? While we appreciate the applause, I did want to let you know that actually in the House it isn't allowed, but I understand. Councillor Zanella.
Thank you. Could I ask why people would not want streetlights?
Councillor Drodge, did you want to respond to that, please?
Through your worship, so they really like to look up at the night sky, and you really do lose a lot of that night view, even with the newer style streetlight. It does create a bit of a halo. Secondly, there are private people on that street. They don't like a lot of foot traffic, so when you start putting more streetlights, you tend to have more people want to go down there and walk their roads. Most people that walk on Limerick Street are probably residents of Limerick Street. I think it's a bit of both of those reasons is the reason why they don't want to have streetlights.
So
Thank you, Councillor Snella. Go ahead.
So my concern is that there have been a few, actually there was a street in my ward that asked not to have streetlights, and they were told they were being put in anyways. My concern is that we are a changing community, and I just think that streetlights are a little bit safer, but it's just my opinion. And at some point, that street is going to change, and there's going to be many different people moving in there who may want streetlights. So I don't know what happens then. Then do they come and ask for streetlights, and do we say, well, no, you don't want streetlights, so nobody's going to get them? Sorry.
That's okay, Councillor Zanella. Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm waiting for
Okay. Councillor Drodge.
Thank you, Your Worship. So geographically, this road is, it's actually part of Churchill, not Guildford, but Guildford is a hamlet, and where it's located, you're never going to see growth, not anytime in the near future. And the streetlights, I believe, that are, the hydro poles that are being changed right now on Limerick Street would have the potential at a later date, if needed, to add a street light. So the infrastructure is not being taken away. We're just not putting the street lights in at this time.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Can I just ask staff what the process is and how a street is chosen to get street lights in terms of, are there safety concerns? Are there guidelines which we're supposed to follow as a town in terms of liability and that kind of stuff? So I'm just asking what the town's process is to designating streets to get lights.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, through to Council Waters. So there is a street lighting policy that identifies how street lights should be considered. Safety is obviously one of the factors. We do look at areas that have not had street lights currently, so there is kind of a program every year of identifying individual streets. And we obviously started, priority was intersections, sort of working out from those initial safety areas to now the residential areas. Staff are in the process of updating that policy, and it'll come back to council because it is a number of years old. So we are going to be looking at that. It does outline the process in terms of, as Mr. Hayes indicated, going out with a pole. And I know that was one of the questions that came up. So that is identified in the policy to poll the neighborhood in terms of the streetlights.
So I understand the idea behind dark communities, dark skies, that kind of stuff, and I think it's a wonderful idea. But my question is, as in traffic safety, there are certain rules which transportation needs to follow in order to put stop lights in. And so I'm just asking, so my curiosity is whether or not there are those same guidelines here for streetlights. And if we choose through the poll not to put them in, is there any liability that the town assumes if an accident occurs on that street, somebody gets hit by a car, can we be held responsible because we chose to uphold the dark community request that we're getting from this street?
I'm not sure if that's Director Lee or Director Park in question.
Mayor Dolan, I guess I'll start because you're right. I'm not sure I want to weigh in on the liability question, which would probably be for Mr. Parkin. I think the policy is clear on the factors, and I was actually just trying to open it up so I'd have it in front of me, but on the factors when streetlights would be considered. But there's nothing that would require streetlights in all of those locations, so I don't think it opens it up for liability by not putting streetlights in, which was kind of the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Saunders.
I live on Big Bay Point, and we don't have streetlights, and we love it. I mean, we get a little bit of light, but the whole community doesn't have lights, and so, but there's no problem. We don't see any problem, so we like that. But like East Street and West Street have them, but part of Big Bay Point, like where I live on the 30 side road, doesn't have them, and we don't have any problems.
Thank you. So just one question further. So I believe Mr. Hayes asked, what would take precedent, our poll or his poll? My suggestion would be if it's 94%, and it switches and goes the other way, then we have a bigger problem. But any question? Does anybody want to answer that question, Director Lee?
Mayor Dolan, certainly I think through discussion with staff, we wouldn't look to go out for another poll by the town. We would look to accept the petition that's been provided.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's quite a bit of debate over a dead-end street in a place that's not going to have any through traffic, that doesn't have a problem with Airbnbs, that is a rather quiet little space in the community. So, I mean, this to me is a no-brainer. You have a stable population. It's not a legal issue. They've expressed themselves very clearly what they wish. It's just matter of fact. I mean, and we can put the resources into a place where a liability issue may actually come into play. So this is why I seconded it, because I fully agree with Councillor Drudge and the population.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I mean, we've, for years, many years now, struggled with our urban versus rural, our cottage versus full-time, and trying to find the right balance in our community that services both populations. And I think we'll have to continue to do that. Any further discussion? Councillor Drudge.
I missed that, Ms. Lee. You said that we would accept the petition as is. We would not entertain a poll through the town. We would be okay with that?
Yeah, that's what she said. So through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Drudge, the policy does speak to the poll. So, and that's obviously what's in the recommendation on the screen. It would potentially be confusing with the petition and then a poll coming out from the town. So it would be whether council staff are satisfied that the poll is providing clear evidence, but the policy does speak to the poll.
Councillor Drudge.
Through your worship, then is it possible then to revise my motion and deem this a dark community this evening and not do the poll and accept the petition?
Councillor Drudge, it's your motion and you can do whatever you like with it.
I would like to put a motion forward to deem Limerick Street a dark community and accept their petition that's been submitted.
So we're going to have to do some procedural gymnastics here. So you're offering a revised recommendation to your recommendation. And Just give us a few minutes here if you're watching. We're just changing the final clause in the recommendation, and then when Councillor Drodge is satisfied with the wording, we'll see if the seconder is okay with it as well, and then we'll call the vote. Councillor Waters.
Can I just ask some clarification, because you brought it up, Mayor, is the rural versus urban community. So here we have, if the urban community were collectively voiced, so are we suggesting that this can be done in any urban community, or is this strictly a rural community issue?
I brought it up only because we've dealt with, through the years, we've dealt with exotic animals, we've dealt with hunting, we've dealt with fires. In this case, I see Limerick Street as still partly seasonal. So places where it's a lakefront road, places where people still have bonfires and treat some of the areas more as a cottage, whereas some of them are more permanent residents. So I just think that as Innisfil grows, more of these kind of conflicting uses, we'll have to try to find the right balance to make sure that we're things like roundabouts and farm equipment and all of these things that we need to find a way to live together cohesively and in harmony.
The only reason I ask is because it sounds like Limerick's a more rural community than it is urban. And if we use the word urban, are we opening up the fact that a street in downtown Alcona could request that it become a dark community in an area which has lights all over it? So I was just looking for some clarification. I like the idea of a dark community. I just want to make sure it's used appropriately.
Councillor Drodge.
Through you, Your Worship. So we are following under policy, and like Ms. Lee had spoke earlier, this policy is coming up for review. So some of those questions that you're asking, they might change, but currently right now we're going as per policy.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Mayor Dolan, just to be clear, so the policy speaks to urban residential roads, which would be all of the residential roads, and rural intersections. So there isn't a category for rural residential within the town. So everything would fall under that urban category currently under the policy.
Thank you for that clarification. And then I'd ask the mover and the seconder to have a look at the language now in the final clause and let me know if it's agreeable to you.
I'm okay with the wording.
Deputy Mayor?
I concur.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments on this item? All those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? That is carried. Now we'll go to item... Thank you. Okay, one little clap. Thank you. Now we'll go to item 7, which is County Council, Municipal Associations, and Conservation Authority Committees. So we will ask the Deputy Mayor to let us know what it transpired at County Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yesterday we met for the first time in person since the beginning of the summer, and it went rather quickly. We had a few debates. One over the budgetary process and what we're looking to do to see if any savings could be achieved at the county level. So we're going to see how that proceeds in the future. Another situation that arose is an ambulance acquisition. We purchased 3 used ambulances from York Region simply to ease the burden on the Simcoe County paramedics vehicles because the new ones we learned were going to take approximately 20 months to get. So it was a bit of a wait, and we want to make sure that we provide the greatest service possible. On the Economic Development Subcommittee, there was a mention of a grant from the Simcoe Trail Hub Project, received a $220,000 grant from Ontario Trillium Foundation. On top of that, there was a $100,000 contribution from the Regional Tourism Organization 7 for the bike racks, repair stations, benches, and more. So in essence, what that means is through the 16 communities, we have 17 bike trails, and this covers a great amount of area. I've ridden them myself, so the benches are a welcome relief after a good 10, 15 kilometers on the bike. The repair stations are good. They're even getting local artists to paint them, so everything seems to be moving along properly. And after COVID, I'm pretty sure there's many people that want to get out, get the fresh air, and enjoy the extended summer that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have something they'd like to report? Thank you, Councillor Richardson.
Through you, Your Worship. Last month I was able to attend the AMO conference for the first time. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. I got to sit on some really great sessions. I also got to meet with a couple of different ministers and a parliamentary assistant. I have lots of information and lots of ideas that I'm excited to bring forward to Council.
Thank you. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last month, I attended the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority monthly meeting. I wanted to remind residents that the Tiffin Nature Program is, they have a fall session that goes from September 5th to November 30th. So if you want to check that out on the website. We had some preliminary budget discussions about 2024, trying to get NVCA service levels improved. There's a lot of talk about that through the budgeting process. They are dealing with a common problem of being short-staffed, so they're looking to rectify that. But after the meeting, we also had a tour of the grounds there. We saw the Maple Sugar Shack, and I think at last meeting we talked about disc golf. They actually have a disc golf course at the Tiffin Conservation Area. So for those disc golfers, you can go there until Innisfil gets one. And that's my report on the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. Anyone else have any committees of council that they would like to report on this evening? Councillor Drodge.
Through you, Your Worship, I attended a Traffic Safety Committee meeting last evening, and there were a few updates, but we did have this one little bit of information that I wanted to share, and it's concerning 27 and 89. So we did a toll there, and what the data brought back was that we had red light runners running east and west of 322. We had total red light runners, by the way, this is for 1 week, total red light runners of 701. We had a total number of trucks going east and west, and this is again just for 1 week, of 4,047. And that is just east and west. So I know that when you look and you see where the TSAC money went for this past budget, and a lot of it was pretty heavy at 89 and 27. I just wanted you to know that's a pretty serious intersection, and we're well along on fixing it all up.
Thank you, Councillor Drodge. Anyone else have any comments? I would just make a couple. First of all, with the county, the one item was that we dealt with was a blue box transition and a collection week change. So we don't have a lot of information about the collection week change, except that it's going to affect every municipality in Simcoe County. So we think it's going to be October or November. They're going to start advertising in October. We'll make sure that we do a really good swath of advertising to make sure change is not easy. I know that, but we'll try to make it as painless as possible. And of course, the deputy and I will be advocating for our lakeshore areas that we try to keep as close to Mondays as possible, because we know the cottagers like to have their collection shortly after the weekends. And then just to further on Councillor Richardson's comments about the AMO conference that was held in London this past month, it was an honor for me to attend with 3 new councillors, because it helped me remember what it was like to go to my first conference as well and see it through their eyes. It is a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but I think that we all gained so much from it, not only from the presentations and the concurrent sessions, but also from networking and learning from other municipalities and having other municipalities come and ask us how we do things as well. It's always good to share that information. The ministerial delegations with the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trades, the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing were all meetings we had, so it was a very busy time. Our CAO, Mr. Gershow, did a great job in presenting on a panel for municipal services corporations to a sold-out crowd. And then I think my personal highlight of the trip was the Women in Leadership breakfast with Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdesdale. And she also interviewed the First Lady of Iceland, Eliza Reid, who happens to be a Canadian, and it was wonderful to hear them talk about leadership across the globe. It was also, for me personally, an opportunity to thank the LG. She's been a real rock through the pandemic. We've had probably 5 or 6 scheduled calls where she would call me right in the depths of the pandemic and talk me through. I'm going to get emotional. Just help me out through the whole thing. And she was a really solid leader, and she's going to be leaving us now, and we're getting a new LG. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. So we'll go on now to our consent agenda, unless there's anyone else. Seeing none. We'll start with our consent agenda. And as we do this, what you'll find out, it sounds a little bit like a bingo game at first, but there's many items and reports listed in the agenda, all come with a recommendation from staff. If council are happy with that staff recommendation and have already had their questions answered through phone calls or emails, then they won't be pulled, and we will consider adopting all of those staff recommendations at the end of the meeting. Anyone who wants to ask questions or change a recommendation will ask for that item to be pulled, and it'll come into committee of the whole, at which point we will have further discussion on those items. So here we go. Item A1, special council meeting minutes dated August the 9th. A2, council meeting minutes dated August the 9th. A3, special council meeting minutes dated August the 16th. B1, that would be the summary report from the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. B2 would be the summary of the Innisfil Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Could I ask someone to pull that one, please? I had some questions on that one. Thank you, Councillor Drodge. C1, staff report, Big Bay Point, 13th line and 25th side road. Councillor Saunders, refer to committee. C2, committee vacancies. C3, the Innisfil Sports Group Incorporated License Agreement. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I don't want to pull this. I just wanted to give a little detail on that report. The Innisfil Sports Group is the owner group of the Innisfil Spartans. And I just wanted to let everybody know that this Sunday is their home opener at 3:30 at the Innisfil Rec Center. So come out and cheer the Spartans.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ices. And also there's season's tickets on sale for the Spartans too. So I would encourage everybody who enjoys hockey to get involved in that. C4, Council Discretionary Grant Program Guidelines. C5, staff report regarding speed limit on Allen Street and Pemberton Way in Churchill, and John Street. I did have, I didn't need to pull it either. I just had just a couple of, one question if I could please. So I wondered, not that I think anybody's going to be upset about the speed limit going down, but I wondered if we'd done any communication to the residents on that street to let them know that there was going to be a change in the speed limit.
So Mayor Dolan, at this point, no, there hasn't been communication.
I don't know, like I can't imagine anybody being upset about it going down, but the only other comment I would make is, and I guess this is to Councillor Drodge since it's his ward, is typically when we do this, we get a lot of Me Too's. So be prepared for all of the other streets saying, hey, how come them and not us? So just a warning that your phone might be ringing. So that's item, that takes care of all the staff reports. So staff reports for information. D1 is the Housing Accelerator Fund. Councillor Ices.
I'd like to refer that to committee, please.
Thank you. And then E is bylaws, and E1 is a bylaw to remove the hold symbol for an Elsemi property. And E2 would be a bylaw regarding Friday Harbor, West Townhouse stocks. E3, a bylaw to amend, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, right. This is a bylaw for the AMPS fees for the parking. Okay, so then we have no correspondence for action. Under correspondence for information is G1, which is a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs, former Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I would just say that that is a letter requesting the municipality meet a housing target of 6,300 homes by 2031. And just to let council and the audience know that staff will be coming forward with more information after they've gathered more information at the next council meeting. Thank you. And G2, the County of Simcoe meeting highlights of August the 8th. And that is the end of our consent list. So a mover and a seconder, please, for the consent list recommendation. Councillor Zanella, Deputy Mayor Fowler, all those in favor? That is carried. And a motion to resolve into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Drodge, all those in favor? That is carried. I just want to let everybody know here that we had a very early morning this morning at a mayor's breakfast, so that's why I'm a little off my game tonight. So our first one was B2, and that was actually moved by, who pulled that one for me? I thought that was Councillor Drodge. Thank you. So the mover was Councillor Drodge for B2, Clerk's office. And the seconder is Councillor Waters.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I had this one pulled because I just had some questions about the requests from the committee, and maybe Chair Fowler, you could respond, or I can get staff to respond. So were the committees given the original consultants heritage impact assessments to review?
Thank you, Your Worship. To my knowledge, they were, but there's been some questions brought up regarding the property and the legitimacy of the impact assessment. So they're looking for further information on that before any decisions are made. It's just simply just crossing T's and dotting I's.
Thank you so much, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Fowler. And do we have, I'll direct this one to staff, do we have a scope or a budget for this project?
Mayor Dolan, we don't have a scope or a budget. Given they're associated with the development approvals, the cost for the peer review would be invoiced back to the developer, but we would be looking to provide a scope and obtain a consultant. The peer review would be on whether the impact assessment that was received meets the requirements under the legislation or not. So are there gaps that were missed in that? So it would be a very focused scope.
Great, thank you very much. Those were all my questions. So we have a mover and a second. Anyone else have any questions on that item? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a question about in the report for both properties. It talked about contextual value versus historical value, and there was one other value that these properties didn't meet. Can someone explain to me what the definition of contextual value is when we're looking at these properties?
Director Lee.
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Ises. So in terms of the contextual value, it's the context of where the property is located within the Heritage District. So it has historical value based on not just the physical site or the historical attributes of how old the building is, but by association of the surrounding area, not just the building itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Next was item C1, and that was Councillor Saunders. And you'll need a seconder, Councillor. Did you want to speak to it, sir?
I just have a couple of questions on this one. So I guess it's going to go to Director Lee. Now, in 2018, there was a $1.8 million, and now 5 years later, there's $4.8 million. Was it the previous person that did this? Because there's significant utilities being relocated. I can't see it being so much. Was it just the 2018 budget was not done properly? Because in the 5 years, I can't see going up $3 million. And then I do have a follow-up question on that one.
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Saunders. I think there's a number of compounding factors. When the original dollar values were put in the transportation master plan by the consultant, they would have been estimates based on what they anticipated a roundabout might look like. Those values were probably low even at that point in time. But I would add to that there are compounding factors: increased costs for utilities, increased construction, increased consulting fees. All of those have compounded significantly through COVID, and we're seeing that in all of our construction projects. So I think it's a combination of those factors.
Thank you. I didn't really want to point fingers and blame someone, but I just wanted a little thing. Now, you want to come back or don't want to come back with $3 million more. I can't see myself voting for $3 million for a budget. But given now that the town's now aware that Friday Harbor has a a hotel and conference center ready to go. Does it make sense to defer this consideration for the roundabout report? Because couldn't we use DC costs for this roundabout instead of jacking up the taxpayers $3 million?
Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Through to Councillor Saunders. So there were a couple of components there. As noted in the staff report, there were to be DC credits for the work. Friday Harbour was to pay the cost of the roundabout, and then they would get credits. When we look back at the transportation master plan, it does identify certain population and employment numbers for the Friday Harbour area. And so while it doesn't break down all of the components that would have been contained within that, based on the population and employment numbers that I see there to 2041 and 2051, I would expect that included the hotel and the conference center because it's a fairly significant employment number within there. So it would look to be beyond the buildings that were identified, and we would have had the entire secondary plan which considered the conference center. So certainly it's not staff's recommendation that we would defer at this point in time. The development charges components aren't going to change by delaying it.
Sorry, just one further. So what you basically hear, if the hotel and conference center was already signed on and are already undergoing, we could use some of that money, but since it's not signed on and not confirmed, that we don't want to go into our DC reserves?
Through you, Mayor Dolan, Councillor Saunders, I guess what I'm suggesting is the assumptions that were made for the transportation master plan and into the development charges background studies at the time would have factored the hotel and the conference center in already, so there won't be any change in terms of development charges credits that would be different. So we've already looked at the development charges and what would be a contribution towards this roundabout.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to walk you through this. Ms. Lee, I apologize if I seem redundant with the questions, but I'm just trying to get a baseline here. Back when we put out RDS 287, there was an increase of $600,000 for the roundabout due to the fact that they were removing and replacing the electrical systems underground and whatnot, the necessary requirements. Now, the same moving and the same idea jacked up the price 260% over since the last report came in less than a year ago. So my question is, we've got the extra money in up to over 1.8, but now that cost is going towards signalization, which is an interim. If we're not moving the electrical grid, why is the cost the same? Or is there something that I'm missing?
Director Lee.
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Deputy Mayor Fowler. So the costs that are identified, that we identified specifically in January when we came to council, that there was an increase in the hydro cost specifically of the $583,000 and change. And council did agree to provide that additional cost specifically for the utility relocation work for InPower. In the staff report that's before council tonight, it's not just the hydro, there's also Bell and other utility relocations that are factored into that, as well as the, at the time in January, we didn't have the final detailed design and cost from Friday Harbour's consultant, SCS. That's what we've been working towards, and based on where those design and consulting costs are now, we were comfortable to come back to council and say these are fairly solid numbers that they believe will be the finest to go out to tender. This would be the cost of this project. So we felt it was at this time we needed to come back and advise council of what these costs would be based on that finalized design.
Go ahead, Councillor Fowler.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up with some questions then. You said interim signalization. Does this infer that the roundabout will be going in at a later date? And if so, what time frame are we looking at, considering the fact that we're talking $3 million more out of the DC funds?
Through to Deputy Mayor Fowler. So interim was the term we used. The intent is these would be full signals that would go in this area, and staff would be continuing through all of our transportation reviews to continue to monitor the intersection based on not only the growth at Friday Harbor, but growth in the area to determine whether there is an additional warrant for a roundabout to occur. With the amount of growth that we anticipate going on, we expect that will happen. Do we have a timeline to say that's 20 years, 50 years? No, we don't have that timeline. That's where the staff report speaks to continuing to assess and determining if and when it's appropriate to proceed to the roundabout. The current transportation master plan recommendations speak to signalization or a roundabout. It wasn't a roundabout that was required.
Thank you. Because I had this idea in the back of my mind that I needed clarification with, because if it was going to be 4 years down the road, we're suddenly going to come back and ask for $3 million, 4 to 5 years down the road. I think that would have caused a little bit of a kerfuffle with the community. So at least I understand now that according to the plan, we're following the and/or option and then keeping an open mind as to the future, but there's no, as I understand you explaining, there is no solid commitment to turning to a roundabout unless a need arises.
That's correct, Deputy Mayor Fowle. We will continue to assess, and it would be based on the additional warrants and safety concerns to go to a roundabout rather than, there would be a need for something beyond signalization, but that's all that's required at this time.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters and then Councillor Drodge.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a variety of questions, so please hold off your questions. My first question is that when the fire hall was built, Friday Harbor, we anticipated that it would cost us $3.5–4 million to build the fire hall. Because Friday Harbor was getting credits, somehow we ended up with a $7 million fire hall. And correct me if I'm wrong on those numbers. So my question is, why would we ask Friday Harbor for an estimate on this? And then are we tendering it out, or is it going to be the same where their contractors are doing the work? So I'm just looking for a comparison to the way we've done things before, and why are we using Friday Harbor? So that's my first question.
Through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Waters. So SCS is the consulting firm that is preparing the design and the breakdown of the cost, but it is also being reviewed by staff, and it would then go out to tender.
Okay, so that's different from the way we did it last time, where Friday Harbor contractors basically did the construction, if I'm correct?
That's before her time, so I don't know if that's a fair question.
That's why I'm looking behind me. My understanding is that would be correct.
Okay, thank you. I guess my next question is that usually with these types of projects, DC pays for a majority of the project. So in this case here, if we were to go, if we were to put a roundabout in, would DCs pay for 90% of that? And if that's the case, it doesn't impact the taxpayer in Innisfil at all. And so why wouldn't we not go ahead with it? Because that was the project that we looked like we were heading for, and that's why all the utilities were moved.
Through to Councillor Waters. So when I actually look at the staff report, and it is a breakdown between the development charges, so 90% development charges and 10% alternative revenue source, ARS reserve fund. What we've identified though is, although yes, it is development charge funded, one project can then significantly deplete the reserves. And when we look at the longer term in terms of the roads reserve, roads and related development charge reserve, we won't have the money we require for the projects if we look at the full 10-year capital plan.
So my question is that I was under the assumption that the DCs for this project would mostly be coming from Friday Harbor. And would those DCs not because they're asking for a credit. So my question is, would that not then pay for the project as opposed to dipping into reserve? So are we not going to get that money back? Or am I misunderstanding something?
No, Councillor Waters. I mean, potentially we're getting that money back. I think the challenge is the number of units that would be required to be constructed at Friday Harbour to fully recoup that would be over a significantly longer period of time than we're going to pay the money at the front end for that roundabout. So while we would over time collect it back because it was identified in the development charges study as a project, it's a longer term horizon to recoup.
Thank you.
Councillor Drodge.
Through your worship. So Friday Harbour DC charges, are they only applicable to Friday Harbour intersections and projects?
No, they pay the same development charge. It's a town development charge.
So then, yeah, I understand what you had said. So if we use $3 million of our DC charges as a whole, other projects in the 10-year master plan might get put off because we depleted our DC charges.
Correct.
That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have a problem. I don't understand how we passed it and everything was a go, and now it's not because something else has happened. So are we going to say that this roundabout may not happen for 20 years? I know you said you can't give a timeline, but if it's 20 years from now, what happens to the signalized lights that we put in?
Director Lee.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Councillor Zanella, I can't say I don't want to commit to 20 years. It could be sooner than 20 years. It will be that ongoing monitoring to determine if we need to change to a roundabout. The signals would be put in place. As we've noted in the report, the intent would be to construct the signals next year, and they would remain in place until there was a warrant for something else to replace the signals. So if they need maintenance, repairs, those would be factored into ongoing budgets.
Okay, thank you. And then when that happens, do we take the signals out?
Correct, yes, the signals would be removed.
And what happens to them? Can we use them somewhere else?
It would depend on the condition of them, whether they could be used. We would have to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Is this just signalization which we're paying for, or usually when we do an intersection, we think of what the road's going to look like? We know the 25th is supposed to be undergoing some renovations over the next 5 to 6 years. So does that mean a complete overhaul of the intersection in terms of double lanes, turning lanes, that type of stuff? Or is this just temporary? If it's just signals, then it sounds to me that we are planning on changing it. If it's a full intersection, it would seem to me that'd be the more permanent solution or a long-term timeline between that and future turning circles.
So through to Councillor Waters, the signalization requires a certain amount of the utility work to be completed. The roundabout does require potentially land acquisition. That wouldn't. So there are some components that would happen as part of a roundabout that would not happen as part of the signalization requirement, which is where some of those costs can be reduced because those land needs aren't being addressed currently.
I don't think you answered my question.
Okay.
So my question is that if we go with signalization, is it just the lights that we're going to change and the road is going to remain exactly the same? I would think that you'd want to be preparing for the 25th side road upgrades, and so you'd end up widening the intersection to accommodate turning lanes, because right now there are no turning lanes in there. So my question is this budget including that upgrade for the intersection itself, or is this just we're going to plunk down 4 lights around each of the corners and that's it for $1.8 million?
And I am just going to pull up the sheet to look at that really quickly.
And while the director's looking that up, the other part that you saw in the report regarding the, I won't call it urgency, but the requirement for Empower to get going on supplying power to the Hewitt's Creek subdivision in the south end of Barrie that is a customer.
So Councillor Waters, that would be factored into the design, looking at those surrounding projects and what should be accommodated now within that signalization budget. So as much work as we can do, we would do that currently with the signalization.
Because I think that would be, because we're putting the signals in for safety reasons, that you'd want to have the appropriate turning lanes, left turning lanes and that kind of stuff, right turning lanes for that project. So if we're paying 1.8 for just lights and without the infrastructure for turning lanes and that kind of stuff, it seems like a rather expensive project for turning lights. So I would like to see the rest of that infrastructure put in there so it makes the entire intersection much safer.
Director?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Just looking at the anticipated cost for the signalization, there is a significant component of that is still the utility relocations. So understanding the hydro, the bell, all have to be part of that regardless. So almost, I'm doing the math really quickly in my head, there's the design components and then those utility relocations, which are still factoring in well over half of the signalization cost. So then the balance would be for the actual signals design and construction completion.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? Any opposed? Can I see those again? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. That's carried. And next we go to item D1, and that is Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I have Councillor Constantine as my seconder. So I read the report, and I just had some questions for staff regarding the initiatives that were put forward to achieve the funding that the federal government is assisting us with housing targets. So I'll just start with some regarding those initiatives. The first one, it was with regards to infrastructure planning. Can projects be prioritized to get ahead of the growth? I think we all see, and it's not just our municipality, but a lot of municipalities are in a bit of a catch-up mode. We see construction all over the place that happens, after the growth is already in place. Will this fund allow us to keep pace or catch up to avoid some of the situations we're in now?
So through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Ices, I'm not sure the amount of funding that is identified will allow us to catch up. We obviously just finished talking about signals and the cost of signals, but certainly in terms of infrastructure planning, some of the funding is identified to be used for infrastructure planning. So through the master plans and the works that have been proposed, we can certainly be looking to allocate funds towards some of that infrastructure.
Thank you. My next question was with regards to the affordable housing question, that initiative, and it talks about the missing middle housing. So I can think back to last council term when we council approved the opportunity for residences to go to a third housing unit on their property. And after they had their second one in, but there was a lot of comment about the amount of illegal second units that are out there, and we can think of those situations pretty easily, right? When the families are in trouble, they move together, or they're trying to make some extra money, so they rent their basement out. So if we get residents to legalize these apartments, can they be counted in the new housing mix?
So through to Councillor Izes, certainly if a resident went through the process through planning and building approvals to have an apartment recognized, then it would contribute to that missing middle that's identified in the application. It would contribute to that.
So I was happy to hear that. My thought would be that perhaps if we could use some of that funding as incentives to get homeowners to put in the legal secondary apartments. If we could find a way to do that, maybe that's kind of the quickest way to achieve some of that housing that we're all looking for. It would, it helps when you want to resell your house if you have a legal second apartment in it. And I think it would make a lot of sense if we could devise some sort of a cost share on getting that done for our residents. Another question I had was with regards to these targets that we are asked to hit, and a lot of municipalities are trying to hit that. Will we be able to get the staff to help process these permits? Can we ramp that up? And then how a lot of the streamlining that they talk about that staff can do, I'm wondering how the public would be informed about some of these decisions.
So through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Izes, a couple of questions in there, Councillor Izes, in terms of can we get the staff? I think there's a combination. It's trying to streamline some of the processes. Some of the identified initiatives include things like the pre-consultation OPA, the CPPS, and the cloud, the e-permitting are all intended to streamline, so create efficiencies, ideally to then create capacity within some of the existing staff. And then obviously if that's insufficient, then we have to come back through budget processes along through the corporate structure to determine whether we can get additional staffing. But we want to look at those efficiencies through the process first. And that's what's identified in the staff report is through those initiatives. I think the second component of that in terms of how does the public become aware, as we noted in the staff report, we've identified the 9 initiatives. Each one of those does have a process to come back to council to provide more detail on what the initiative is, how it would be implemented, what are the changes. So there will be further discussion at council, and then a number of those solutions would then form changes on our website or process changes that we would inform the public of as well.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have on the report. I did want to commend staff for getting all that work done. It's always amazing to me how when we have these programs, they announce it 1 year, and a year later they give you like 2 months to get it all together, and so that they can announce how they spend it. So thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you, Councillor. CAO Gershow.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Just building off of Councillor Izes' question, I think this would be a good time maybe to remind Council, if we take a step back, we have both the provincial government and the federal government asking us to do things at the same time, but they're going about it in different ways. So keeping in mind the Housing Accelerator Fund is a federal program where the federal government has basically said, if we gave you money, could you build more housing? And if we gave you that free money, what would you do with it to build more housing? And that's the report you have tonight. Whereas the province is saying, we expect you to build a certain number of housing units by 2031. Please make us a housing pledge where you're going to tell us how you're going to accomplish that. That will be coming to council in December, we expect, at the provincial level. And then recently, and we'll talk more about this on September 27th, the province has come along and said, by the way, we have a new funding program called the Building Faster Fund that we think might help you reach our target. So they're both talking about accelerating housing. They're both talking about funding for municipalities, but the approach is different. And in this case, keep in mind that the federal funding, it's an application we've submitted. We may not get a penny of that money. So that remains to be seen. Whereas what the province has said is that if we make a certain amount of progress on housing, then we will get money from the new Building Faster Fund. So we're in these two parallel universes where the federal and provincial governments are both asking us to do something and explain how we think we're going to do it, and they're maybe going to give us money for it. So.
Thank you, CAO Gershow. It's like dad's telling us to one thing and mom's telling us to do something else. But the Housing Acceleration Fund, the first announcement was made today in London. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. And thank you for that. Any other questions from members of council on the Housing Accelerator Fund? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. And I believe that covers all of the items that were pulled to Committee of the Whole. So now we'll now do our rise recommendation, and that is moved by Councillor Richardson and seconded by Councillor Saunders. All those in favor? That is carried. Now, consideration to adopt the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. Moved by Deputy Mayor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, we have notice. So this is a notice of motion from Councillor Saunders. So this is just notice this evening, and we'll be considering this motion on September the 27th. And then we have notice of which motion which notice has been given, and that is item, we've already done 10.1, which is Councillor Drodge. So 10.2 was Councillor Constantine.
Thank you, Your Worship. As we know that in Lefroy and Bel Air, there's flooding for a very long time. Some people said 50 years, some said 60 years. So we all know that it has been going on for a long time. So now we know that, we are advancing in science and technology. So what I would like to know if there's a way that we can find, some relief for the resident in these areas. So tonight, this motion is I'm requesting the staff to provide at an early date a presentation and what can be done to alleviate, some of the flooding and the monetary costs that will come along with it. So, and provide it to us at another council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine. And your seconder is Councillor Drodge. Thank you. So the motion is on the screen. I think also included was what have we done in the past too. So we have 5 new members of council, and we understand this is an issue that's been going on for generations, but it's important that the councillors at the table understand the issue, what we've done in the past to mitigate what we're doing now and what we can do in the future so that all of council can be brought up to speed. Any other questions or comments on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you. So that brings us to announcements. Announcements from Councillor Ices. Anything, Councillor, from Ward 1?
Just one, and we may be a little late in the season, but every Tuesday night at the Stroud Curling Club before curling starts, there is a cornhole league that you can come to at 7 o'clock. It costs us $15, and apparently it's lots of fun. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Ward 2, please, Councillor Constantine.
So I have one, and it's for the Legion. So on September 16, from 1 to 7, they will be having a corn boil, and it's for $12 per person. And you can also get a sausage or hot dogs or salad.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richardson.
Okay, so on September 9th, I attended the Wilson Street 1 kilometer fun run, which was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, as well as there was a grand opening for Innisfil Eye Center. On the 10th, I got to attend the Innisfil Minor Baseball Year-End Award Ceremony, which was really cool to hand out some awards to some of those volunteers that really go over and above and work really hard for the Baseball League. On Saturday at the Lakeshore branch of Innisfil Library is Makerfest from 10 till 2. Lots of fun. We've been going as a family the last couple of years. There's lots of great events and things happening that day, as well as in the evening is the Rotary Harvest Dinner, which I'm looking forward to. On September 24th, also at Lakeshore, the library is the Mother-Daughter Empowerment Conference and Awards. You can still get tickets for that. Speaking of the library, they just opened up their fall programs. Yesterday, a lot of the stuff did get filled, but there are still some programs open. They also do have, they're actually looking for a part-time services assistant, as well as there's volunteer opportunities. So those youth that need to get some volunteer hours, you can get that done at the library. The fall rec program guide is out. There's still time to sign up for classes. Most of them start next week, so make sure you check that out. And then lastly, Ava Silva, who is a resident of Ward 3. She's a 12-year-old. She is a baseball player. She was just invited to the Girls Invitational Championship, where she won a silver medal. So we've put in her information so that she could be added to the Sports Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. On September 17th, the Summer Festival Market at 96.6 Innisfil Beach Road will be held from 11 till 3 p.m. On September 24th, the Lions Club Childhood Cancer Fundraiser. It's a pasta dinner from 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock. It's $15 and all the money goes to childhood cancer. On September 29th, is what I'm mostly interested in, is Euchre Night at Lions Club at 7:30. And that's because I came in second in a tournament I was in a month ago. So I'm ready.
We'll see
I'm ready. And then last but not least, this Thursday is the last car show of the night. So if you haven't seen one and gone down and seen some of the great cars, it's the last one for the year.
That speaks to the end of summer, doesn't it? Councillor Zanella.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just probably some good news stories. In my ward, I had probably about half a dozen streets that were on the list in 23 to be repaved. And I've been over, and most of them have been done, and there's still a few that have to be finished. But that's good news for my residents, because that was one thing I heard from them when I was campaigning, was the state of repair of their roads. So that's a good news story for them. Also, I did not get a lot of calls this summer about the garbage down at Leonard's Beach, so I can only assume that we've been really cleaning up down there, because I haven't heard anything bad about it. So thank you.
Love to hear those stories. Thank you. Councillor Saunders.
Last week, we had a meeting with some of the residents from the Big Bay Area Association, and then we were addressing some of them concerns, which were really good. The fireworks, the noise from Friday Harbor, parking and a lot, and the mayor and the deputy mayor there. And I think we did a really good job, and we listened to what everybody's was their complaints and their problems. And we're following through with some of the stuff. I followed through with the chief of the fire chief about the fireworks. So we're working on that with Friday Harbor with the noise as well. And we'll be getting back to their committee as soon as possible with all the answers for them. And other than that, it's been quite in Ward 6.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Drodge.
Okay, so the Cookstown Curling Club, they're struggling a little bit these days. So they have asked me to reach out and see if we can get more people to come out to the Cookstown Curling Club and join as new members. So September 14th between 7 and 9, they are doing a registration info night. New members are just $207 a year. There are many leagues available to join, and if you want, you can reach out to Emily at 306-201-4098 for any more information. Tomorrow evening, 100 Men That Give a Damn has their, I guess, quarterly meeting. And that is basically a bunch of individuals, local individuals, males of course, that have 3 charities present to them, and we sit around together and we collectively choose one of those charities. One of those charities are local, so somebody will get the lion's share that evening. The other thing is I don't know if everybody knows, but the Guildford Local Eatery unfortunately had a fire, but they have since got it all cleaned up, and they are now open, and they will be open from now on. Thank you. And sorry, and Gussapalooza is Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Cookstown at the Steam Show grounds. I apologize for that.
Thank you. I was at the Guildford Local Eatery on Sunday, and it was very enjoyable. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Okay, we'll start with the 17th, the Sunday. We have the Legion Week coming up Sunday at 1 p.m. where I will be representing council to present a scroll to them. It's always very important that we honor those that serve. It's something that touches me deeply. On the 22nd, I believe, yes, at Town Hall, we have a Truth and Reconciliation event. So it's 10 a.m. Anyone who wishes to attend, it's open to all for the public. It's actually worthwhile. I believe it's good that we touch base with our Indigenous population. On the 23rd at 1 p.m. at a museum in the Boyne, Councillor Constantine will be representing town as William Kell gets added to the Wall of Honor. So that is something that is another Innisfilian rising to the occasion. On the 24th at 10 a.m. at Innisfil Beach Park, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association is having a run for Innisfil. It's the first one we have in Innisfil, but all the funds that are being raised are going towards RVH. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor. So just a couple from me as well that others haven't mentioned yet. On August the 10th, we had our last neighborhood nights of the year, and that was 7 neighborhood nights from spring till the midsummer. And you can imagine the amount of coordination that requires and the amount of work from every department in this town, from fire to operations to Parks and Rec. We have building services there. Everybody was represented, customer service, and huge amount of cooperation required, and I think really, really well received. So I think we owe our staff a huge thank you for that. And then on top of all those evenings, they also had music in the park. They had, the library had the Fresh Air Flicks. We had the Mobile Youth Center. All of these extra efforts that went out to help keep our youth busy, to make our community informed, and all of our staff giving up their summer evenings with their family to be out with our residents. So very, very thankful for our staff and all the coordination that they did with that. I'd like to announce one of our committees. It's called the Electoral Engagement Committee. They're looking for a new member, and I know the clerk, you told me when the nominations or when the applications closed for that, and I cannot recall.
Thank you, Your Worship. Applications are being accepted until October the 20th.
Thank you very much. So this committee is tasked with trying to get the voter turnout up in the next election. So if you have an interest in anything like that, I'm sure staff would love to hear from you through the clerk's office. I want to thank everybody who came out to the Mayor's Business Breakfast this morning. It was very well attended, a sold-out crowd, and wonderful, positive, lots of good insights, and wonderful to hear about all the great work that the economic development team is doing with their strategic plan. Continuing with economic development, on September the 8th, I was invited to a roundtable with Minister Philomena Tassi. She's the Federal Minister of Economic Development for the FedDev program in Southern Ontario, and it was wonderful to have some one-on-one time with her to talk about ways that her office could help economic development within the town of Innisfil. And then she invited me to, she was on her way to Temple Plastics to look at a piece of equipment there and tour their facility that they had given money to help expand that business. So I was happy to go and attend that as well. What else did I want to tell you? Oh, so there's going to be a park dedication for Constable Devin Northrop in Bradford, West Gwillimbury. It's going to happen on September the 18th at 5 o'clock. As you'll remember, Constable Morgan Russell was, we named the South Innisfil Recreation Centre after him, so it'll be Devin's family who will be honoured there. We'll also be turning the lights on at Innisfil Beach Park. They'll be blue for the month of October to commemorate the anniversary of Devin and Russell's passing. Also on September the 24th, our police service will be heading to Ottawa. They go to Ottawa every year to the police memorial. I think it's the 46th year of the police memorial. It'll have extra meaning for them this year, with watching two of our own be added to the memorial. And also the Run to Remember. Sadly, it was Devin Northrop was our key person who entered the Run for Remember every year. So this year they'll be running in his honor. Council will be doing our strategic planning workshop on September the 19th. I'm really looking forward to that second session that we're having. And then I also just had a bit of bad news too. A name that'll be very familiar to many Innisfilians, Barb Richards from A Touch of Class auction passed away, and I did attend her service. Her daughter Krista and her granddaughter Maggie live in Lefroy. She founded the Senior Wish program here in Innisfil, and she said, she has always been a huge leader and power to be reckoned with, so she'll be sadly missed by her family. And I unfortunately have a very sad update to share. On behalf of Council, I offer our deepest condolences to the family of Corey Campbell, who tragically lost his life following a motorcycle collision in Innisfil. He fought his injuries bravely for 2 weeks, and he ultimately passed away on September the 10th. And Corey was a local resident, father, husband, and a dear friend and neighbor to many here in Innisfil. Our thoughts go out to his entire family during this incredibly difficult time. Corey's celebration of life will take place this Saturday in Queensville. And as we come together here to remember Corey's life, I encourage all of you to consider supporting the GoFundMe campaign that has been set up in his memory to help ease the burden of any upcoming bills and contribute to the Memorial Fund. And your generosity will undoubtedly make a difference to his family's life right now. It can be found at gofundme.com in memory of Corey Campbell. And this tragic incident serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of road safety. On the same day Corey was struck, there was another motorcycle collision in Innisfil only a few hours later. Road safety is a shared responsibility that affects all of us. As we mourn the loss of Corey, let us also pledge to honor his memory by advocating for safer roads and more responsible driving. Let us all remember that every time we get behind the wheel, we hold the responsibility for safety of ourselves and for others. So thank you, and may Corey rest in peace. And that's the end of our announcements for this evening, and we'll go to the confirming bylaw. And that would be moved by Councillor Ices and seconded by Councillor Saunders. All those in favor? That is carried. And our adjournment will be moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson, that we adjourn at 8:55 p.m. and meet again for the next regular council meeting on October the 11th. All in favor? Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the evening, and thank you for all of you who joined us.